Thank you for tuning into the 2021 Jones Board of Trustee Election Candidate Forum. My name is Peggy Dodd. I am a current senior at Jones High School. Before we begin this forum, I would like to take some time to encourage all registered voters to vote on Tuesday, April 6th at their polling place. Voters may vote for 2 candidates from the 2-year term selection and 2 from the 4-year selection. During this forum, you will hear responses from each candidate to 5 common questions. Each candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer. To remind voters of the candidates for the 2-year term are Kristen Alvarado, who is not with us today, Brian Hurd, Frank Kohler, Timothy Wall, Renee Warren, and Missy Wilkinson. Let's begin with Mr. Hurd. It is important and crucial for future trustees to fully understand what goes into government. Since you are up for re-election, please describe how you have already worked alongside all other city employees, such as the Public Works Authority, the Planning Committee, your fellow trustees, and other Town of Jones departments.
It's a very good question. I have spent the last 4 years making sure to touch base on a regular basis with the department heads. It's important to note that they work by the board as their boss, but not as any individual and board member. So I make it an effort to touch base, find out how their things are going, and use that as a balancing act so that when things come before the board, it's to be a representative of both them and the community in addition. It is a challenge because you want to make sure not to tell them what to do when you hear a problem in the community. So on a regular basis, when there's a policing matter, I have a cordial conversation with the police chief. Ask him the details of what I heard and ask him to balance that out with what happened. I think in the 4 years, there's only been one occasion that there's been any matter that I've discussed with a member of the public and a department head that had to come before the board. That same thing goes with the Planning Commission. I've been to a few of their meetings when it's needed and have been there to answer questions and just listen in and find out what's going on. Beyond that, in the past board members, there's been a lot of turnover in the city council, but I have tried to reach out and work with those other board members as well.
Okay. A trustee must be dedicated to truly serving and bettering the community. Please detail your prior experience with community service, and please include any work with Kiwanis, Oddfellows, the Masonic Lodge, or any other independent organization.
Sure. And I do all of those things. I've spent the last, 6, almost 7 years with Kiwanis, working with our youth and the community. It's a great organization that's allowed me to get to know students throughout the high school and the middle school level, as well as volunteering for activities. We recently installed with that organization a 9-hole disc golf at the park. With the Oddfellows Lodge, I help out with funerals, and it's very humbling to get to be a part of these organizations, as well as the Masons and the breakfasts and dinners that we are very well known for in this community. It's important to be a part of those organizations and give back to the community, and it allows us to give you a better bearing rod to know what the people want within there. One other thing that we've recently started that I'm very proud of is we've started a Girl Scout troop that meets at the Masonic Lodge, where I'm a committee chair that is able to balance the adults with the children to give them leadership skills and civic duty.
Everyone wants nothing but the best for Jones. Funding is often difficult for these small towns. How would you fund programs you either wish to establish or continue during your term?
Unfortunately, that is a very pernicious problem that small towns suffer from. One of the things that we have looked for and we do get is occasionally grant funds. The town of Jones, every time it comes up for a CB, what's considered a community block development grant, we always are successful at getting those and have been able to apply those to benefit the police department and the fire department, more especially as they're one of the least funded departments within the town. Other than that, the only real way that we can generate revenue and funding is through tax dollars, and that's a very difficult thing to do. You have to have rooftops, you have to have people that live here to encourage businesses to think their investment's worthwhile. They'll have enough shoppers. So recently the city council has adopted updated codes that have allowed for stricter zoning rules for developments to make sure the developers follow stricter guidelines, and the builders as well for building code. That should give confidence to developers who want to come in and build homes that are responsible and efficient within the community. That's about the only surefire way I see that we can develop and grow funding to grow the town.
Trustees are the local connection to politics. For citizens to become active voters, they must first be led by active voters themselves. On a scale from 1 to 10, how important is voting in all elections, be that presidential, midterm, or local, to you?
Sure. I think voting is a civic duty that is important for everyone from high school seniors that are 18 and able to vote all the way to the most elderly in our community to be able to express their vote and have a say in what happens and what goes on. I'm very excited to see the interest, and I think the interest in the amount of people that ran in the previous election as well as this one has brought a lot of people that have had interest in running and being a part of the city board, and that's also brought in a lot of voters. 2 years ago's election saw, to my knowledge, the largest election vote tally that we've had in history. So it's very positive to see that interest and growth. I just encourage everyone to vote, but also understand that what you want individually has to balance with a greater community, and we can't always get everything we want, but it's about compromise and growth.
Right. Trustees should know the people they represent well. Please describe your efforts to reach out to the community in order to understand their point of view and opinions prior to this election.
Sure. That is something that being a part of the organizations that I am a part of allows me to meet and grow with the people within the community and listen. Odds are if a member of a lodge or a member of the Kiwanis Club, they express those things and they know people that have had either complaints or positive things. Unfortunately, Jones is on the cusp of a lot of growth, and we hear a lot of negativity about that growth. I think to get to the point, it's not about addressing everyone's concerns, but about understanding that we are at the cusp of a large growth curve in town that'll benefit and tie in with all these questions as far as funding and everything else. And I think it's important that all voters that are going to vote in this election understand that Jones graduates 80 to 100 students a year. And sometimes there have been years with even more. Those kids want to move back. And we're seeing many of the people running in this current election are former Jones students that have moved back. And we have to make sure there's a place for them to come. So to have a mindset of we don't want growth is a negative emphasis, and it shuts out past Jones students and takes the joy and wonder of living here in this town away from the average person that grew up here.
You now have 1 minute and 30 seconds to directly address the audience if you should choose to do so. Your time begins now.
Thank you, Peggy. I would like to say that I've enjoyed the last 4 years being on the board. It has been a learning experience to learn the things you can and cannot do. Very quickly, within a few months of sitting at board meetings, learning that those decisions, the majority of city council meetings are routine business. But it's also when you have people come up to the board that are unhappy with something, the board is very limited on what they can and cannot do. And it's important to understand that every board member has one vote, and they need to work with everyone else to ensure that we meet the needs of the community. And the board's job is to meet the needs of the community, and that doesn't always get us what we want, but it does meet the bigger goals to make sure that we have police on the streets and we have a fire department that's funded where they can do their jobs safely, as well as making sure that our public works department has the tools and resources to update and just maintain our current infrastructure. So I would like to continue that work. I think there's still a lot of work to be done. And I would love to be a part of the future of that.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd.
Thank you.
The next candidate is Mr. Frank Kohler.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It is important and crucial for future trustees to fully understand what goes into city government. Are you prepared to work with all other city employees, such as the Public Works Authority, the Planning Committee, your fellow trustees, and all other Town of Jones departments?
Okay, before I answer that question, good afternoon, and thanks Sarah and Peggy and everyone else to make this happen. I wish I had a little bit more time to prepare for all these questions, but getting these questions 20 minutes prior to the meeting kind of makes a little bad spot. So, am I prepared for something I don't know about? Probably not. But I have been approached by people in town, business acquaintances, for the last 20 years, and I'm still friends with them. So I think this gives me a unique opportunity to say, yes, I will be prepared.
A trustee must be dedicated to truly serving and bettering the community. Please detail your prior experience with community service, including any work with Kiwanis, Oddfellows, the Masonic Lodge, or any other organization.
Okay, just because I'm not involved with any of the things that you listed earlier, doesn't mean I don't know what's going on. I'm pretty sure I have a good sense of what is happening, and again, this goes back to, I don't know, this has been prepared to, I don't know, promote Brian Hurd.
Everyone wants nothing for the best or nothing but the best for Jones. Funding is very difficult for these small towns. How would you fund programs you wish to establish or continue during your term?
Well, that entirely depends on the budget it's available. Since I don't know what the budget is and how it can be allocated, it's hard to say. But I would rather look at the budget and see what we can do in our current environment. For example, I don't know, $800,000 for the police department seems like a lot when we're lacking probably 1 or 2 firefighters. So I would address that first before I initiate any kind of public event like, I don't know, street racers or something like that that has been mentioned on Facebook.
Trustees are the local connection to politics. For citizens to become active voters, they must be led by active voters themselves. On a scale from 1 to 10, how important is voting in all elections, be that presidential, midterm, or local to you?
Well, so I assume you mean 1 not important, 10 very important?
Just in general, are voting in elections important?
Okay, so then it's not important. The way I see it, if you're a citizen of Jones, that gives you the right to speak up in a meeting and to be addressed by the Board of Trustees, and you also have the right to address the Board of Trustees, okay? My political opinion or your political affiliation has no meaning to me.
Trustees should know the people they represent well. Before you please describe your efforts to reach out to the community in order to understand their point of view and opinions prior to the election.
Okay, I think that has been answered with prior answers.
Okay. You now have 1 minute and 30 seconds to address the audience if you choose to do so. Your time begins now.
Okay, I want to thank you guys again for the opportunity. And again, my opinion is that this is a little bit of a tainted event. And everyone that's listening to me, keep in mind what happened over the last 2, 4, 6 years. Make up your mind. Please vote responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you. The next candidate is Mr. Timothy Wall. It is important and crucial for future trustees to fully understand what goes into city government. Are you prepared to work with all other city employees, such as the Public Works Authority, the Planning Committee, your fellow trustees, and all other Town of Jones departments?
Yes, I am. And again, I would like to say thank you for hosting this event. I'm already acquainted with many of those people, the people that work in the office, the Public Works Director, the Code Enforcement Officer, some of the trustee members that we have already. Very prepared, willing to work hand in hand with those various departments to accomplish what we need to accomplish.
A trustee must be dedicated to truly serving and bettering the community. Please describe your prior experience with any community service and include any work with Kiwanis, Oddfellows, the Masonic Lodge, or any other organizations.
My community service is limited to volunteer efforts. The Oklahoma City Food Bank, for instance, Habitat for Humanity, Adopt a Highway. The companies I've been employed with often have volunteer efforts that circle around those type of things. And I'm not a member of the Kiwanis, Oddfellows, or Masonic Lodge, but it sounds like that's something I need. If I want to be involved in this community, that's something I need to become involved in.
Everyone wants nothing but the best for Jones. Funding is difficult for these small towns. How would you fund programs you wish to establish or continue during your term?
I don't know much about funding and how the grants work and things like that, but I do think that we need to broaden our tax base. I'm not saying raise taxes per se, but I noticed in the last few years we've had a few new restaurants open. That adds tax dollars. We're having homes built all around this area around the town of Jones. More rooftops means more tax dollars. I was in favor of the annexation effort that went down 3 years ago. Now the turnpike was in process of being under construction at that time. Now it's in place. I understand there's a little bit different feel in the community about annexation. I'd like to see if that's can be addressed again, just to broaden our tax base, make Jones a favorable environment for businesses, and just encourage new businesses to come here. As people move in, it's like was said before, as people move here, we need new businesses as well.
Right. Trustees are the local connection to politics. For citizens to become active voters, they must be led by active voters themselves. On a scale from 1 to 10, how important is voting in all elections, be that presidential, midterm, or local, to you?
The key phrase in that question is to you or to me. I follow the election calendar at the county election board, and whether it be candidates for election or state questions or local questions, I pay attention to that. So it is important to me. I may not vote in every single one because if I don't think it's apparent or applicable to me and my family or my community, I may not vote. But for the most part, yes, I vote in all those elections.
Okay. Trustees should know the people they represent well. Please describe your efforts to reach out to the community in order to understand their point of view and opinions prior to the election.
I've spoken with some community members just when the opportunity arises.
Here's what I found.
Oh, I apologize.
But mostly friends and family and neighbors, family that live in Jones. And this is my first time running for elected office. And it's something I think I can make a difference. So having those conversations, I find out what people want to see, what they would like for, what changes they'd like to see in Jones. I think listening to those and paying attention and bringing those forward to the Board of Trustees is a big deal. I think it's important.
You will now have 1 minute and 30 seconds to directly address the audience. If you should choose to do so, your time begins now.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you to you for hosting this event. My name is Timothy Wall. I've lived in this community, this wonderful community, for 10 years or so. I've had 2 children graduate from Jones High School, and I have 2 more in high school. So I'm going to be here for a little while longer, at least. This is a wonderful place to live, and I want to see it continue. I've had the experience of standing on both sides of this bench behind me, bringing my concerns to the Board of Trustees and sitting on Planning Commission as well, and listening to some concerns from citizens who want to move here. They want to get their plans approved by the Planning Commission to go forward for approval. So I think I bring that to the table. I like to believe I would do a very good job serving in this capacity for this town of Jones, this wonderful place that I call my home. So thank you very much. I definitely appreciate your vote, and everyone, get out and vote. It is a civic duty. It doesn't take long, so thank you very much.
Thank you. The next candidate is Mrs. Renee Warren.
Hello.
Hello. It is important and crucial for future trustees to fully understand what goes into city government. Are you prepared to work with all other city employees, such as the Public Works Authority, the Planning Committee, your fellow trustees, and all other Town of Jones departments?
Yes, I have known just about all of them for 24 plus years.
A trustee must be dedicated to truly serving and bettering the community. Please describe your prior experience with community service, including any work with any organization, including Kiwanis, Oddfellows, the Masonic Lodge, or any other.
Well, I have not done any of the lodges in town. I did restart the emergency management that we now have in place, and I have personally walked door to door to every house in this town and let it be known that we are here now.
Everyone wants nothing but the best for Jones. Funding is difficult for these small towns. How would you fund programs you wish to establish or continue during your term?
That would be where the grants come in. There's grants out there. You just gotta go online and get them processed. They take time, but they are out there.
Trustees are the local connection to politics. For citizens to become active voters, they must be led by active voters themselves. On a scale from 1 to 10, how important is voting in all elections, be that presidential, midterm, or local, to you?
10. Everybody really needs to vote. Otherwise, they have no voice. They have no say in the matters of what goes on in life.
Trustees should know the people they represent well. Please describe your efforts to reach out to the community in order to understand their point of view and opinions prior to the election.
Like I said, I went door to door, knocked on every single door with emergency management, let them know we're here and who I am. So, and over the last 35 plus years, I think I've met quite a few people out there.
You will now have 1 minute and 1 minute and 30 seconds to address the audience directly if you should choose to do so. Your time begins now.
Whereas a lot of people don't want the town to really grow, it's got to grow. We need the growth. Otherwise, our little town will just cease to exist. We won't be out there anymore. Doesn't mean that we have to turn into the large city overnight, but a little bit of growth here and there is what we do need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next candidate and the last for this section of the forum is Missy Wilkinson. It is important and crucial for future trustees to fully understand what goes into the city government. Since you are up for re-election, please describe how you have already worked alongside the departments and any other city employees, like the Public Works Authority, the Planning Committee, your fellow trustees, and other departments.
So first of all, I just want to be clear that I'm not up for re-election. I was appointed by the board in 2020, so this will be my first election if I am elected. I was on the Planning Commission prior to being appointed to the board. I do continue to speak with those members as necessary. As far as other departments, I kind of have more of an insight because I have been on the board the last few months. Each department has a department head. I meet with them as I see necessary. They're department heads for a reason. They have no need for me to micromanage them. So when something applies to them, then I go speak with them. I'm assuming this question was mainly chosen to address a previous disagreement that I had with the police chief at an open meeting a few months back. Just a little bit about that. It's important to note that disagreeing with another department is not going against them. This particular incident was me addressing an issue that was brought to me by the citizens of Jones. That department head, the police chief, did not agree with my questions and then continued to take it one step further to address me in an unacceptable manner during a public meeting. As I've said before, I'll stand strong for the town of Jones, and that often means standing up to citizens and department heads, and that's what I choose to do.
A trustee must be dedicated to truly serving and bettering the community. Please describe your prior experience with community service and include any work with Kiwanis, Oddfellows, the Masonic Lodge, or any other organization.
Again, this question strikes me a little bit odd. The examples of community involvement were given to me as Kiwanis, Oddfellows, and Masonic Lodge. Officially, I'm not a member of any of these. Oddfellows and Masonic Lodge are fraternal organizations, so as a woman, I'm not able to be a part of those. Due to my job, I am not able to commit to Kiwanis meetings. They're on Fridays at noon most times, and I don't feel putting my name on their list of members when I can't support the meetings is not necessary. However, I was one of the founding members of small business groups here in town, and I've recently joined a networking group that includes businesses around the EOC. The purpose of these are to foster healthy businesses in our community, and that's what we need more than our names on a list of organizations. On a personal level, I'm very involved in this community, but I don't feel the need to put my name on everything that I do, and I won't. So you're not going to get a list of things that I've done, because if that's what you do, then you don't need them. 25 years commitment to the pharmacy here in town is a public service as well.
Everyone wants nothing but the best for Jones. Funding is difficult for these small towns. How would you fund programs you wish to establish or continue during your term?
So everybody wants more, but nobody wants to give more money. And being on the board, I've realized this more than ever. It's primarily done through sales tax. Nobody wants an increase in sales tax. Nobody wants to pay more to support businesses here in town. We have to support the businesses we have before we can expect more businesses to come. Everybody wants more restaurants, but they don't want to support the ones we have. We can't get employees to work there. We can't get the community to support them. So until that happens, unfortunately, that's not where our money is going to come from. There's plenty of room for citizens, not just the council board, to obtain funding in this town. Anybody can apply for a grant, anybody can come in and work with the council to do that. Since I've been on the council, I haven't seen one person attempt that. I can tell you there are things on the horizon. Now it's not the time or the place to go into those, but there are things out there, but it's not completely up to the council to go out and find that money.
Trustees are the local connection to politics. For citizens to become active voters, they must be led by active voters themselves. On a scale from 1 to 10, how important is voting in all elections, be that presidential, midterm, or local, to you?
Voting is one of many ways we can involve ourselves positively in the society around us. I am not running for the U.S. Senate, and I don't feel that this particular election is the place for me to judge others on their voting habits. If you want your voice heard, then vote. This is a personal freedom. I personally do not believe in voting against something. I believe in voting for something, so therefore, if there is an election, regardless of what it involves, if I don't believe in it, I may not vote, because I do not believe in voting against someone. I believe in voting for someone or something.
Okay. Trustees should know the people they represent well. Please describe your efforts to reach out to the community in order to understand their point of view and opinions prior to the election.
Again, I've been over this, I don't know how many times since I've been on the board and while I was campaigning. I do not discuss local politics on social media. Honestly, I wasn't comfortable with doing this, but I felt it was necessary for my campaign. Giving me a list of questions and then having me prepare for them and come up here and read them off of a piece of paper is not what I feel is serving my citizens here. I've always and will continue to be available to anyone who wishes to contact me. If you have questions, I'm here, but I won't do it on social media and I won't do it in a live Facebook feed or YouTube feed.
Okay. You will now have 1 minute and 30 seconds to directly address your audience. Your time begins now.
So I just want to say that I have had so much fun with this campaign. It's something since I was a little girl here that I love seeing happen. I'm fascinated with campaign signs. My son is 10 years old. He's been involved in every sign that's gone in every yard or every banner. We've gone a little extreme, having fun with lighting up banners, and we drive by every night when it's dark to make sure the lights are still working. More recently, yesterday, I addressed every single parent in the elementary line and gave them a card reminding them to vote. Of course, it was my name and my picture on it, but the verbal thing that I told them was to please go vote and reminded them the date. Every one of my signs, every one of my posts, you will see involves vote April 6th. Of course, I want to benefit myself, but the main thing is for people to go vote. Again, this has been so much fun for me. My family has been involved, and we are just thankful to have the support that we have.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you to all the candidates, and best of luck in the election. And thank you guys for watching. This concludes the forum of the 2-year candidates. The stream will return at 4 p.m. this afternoon with the 4-year candidates.